All right, let's talk about one specific day, March 16th, 2026. Because on that day, two completely different stories about how the world works were being told. One was out there for everyone to see, right on the news. The other? Well, that one was happening deep in the shadows. We're going to unpack both.
Okay, so first, the story you probably heard. On March 16th, there's this big crisis brewing in the Strait of Hormuz, and this is what the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, had to say. It's a really clear, really firm message, right? We're not getting dragged into a bigger conflict. This was the official line. This is what the world was meant to hear.
And this wasn't just talk. To show they were serious about stability, Starmer's government announced a £53 million support package for families back in the UK. The idea was simple. Cushion the blow from higher energy prices caused by all the trouble in the Gulf. A public problem gets a very public solution. Makes sense. But here's where things get interesting. What if that whole public crisis, the one everyone was watching so closely, was actually a perfect cover story? What if the real game wasn't about avoiding a war, but about fighting a completely different kind of war? One that isn't fought with ships and missiles, but in the shadows, with the whole other set of rules.
So let's just stick with that public story for a minute, because it wasn't just the UK saying, let's calm down. Pretty much all around the world, the official line was this big, unified chorus of caution.
I mean, it was pretty incredible how in sync everyone was. You had France saying there's no question of sending ships. Germany was skeptical. Japan, South Korea, Australia, all of them were like, nope, we're not sending ships. They were all pushing back against pressure from the US to do more. So on the surface, it looked like the whole world was on the same page. That was the reality we all saw.
But remember that date, March 16th, 2026. Because on that exact same day, while all the world leaders were talking about restraint, a document quietly appeared online, and it described a completely different reality, a world that was operating under a secret and, frankly, a much more cynical set of rules. And this brings us to that second story. This counter-narrative came from an independent analyst named Aslan Sultan. He called his framework the Sultan Doctrine, and it basically lays out a map for how the world really works in what he calls the gray zone.
So what exactly is the Sultan Doctrine? Well, at its heart, it's this idea that all the old rules of diplomacy, treaties, public statements, all that, are basically dead. And what's replaced them is this secret geopolitical code. It's like a hidden language of power that dictates what nations actually do, far away from any press conference.
Now, to really wrap your head around this hidden world, you gotta learn the lingo. The doctrine lays out a few key terms that explain how this entire secret system actually functions. First up is the Gray Zone Protocol. This is a system where every single action is designed so you can deny you did it. So think about it this way. Instead of nations forming public alliances, they become secret partners. The whole goal is to make moves that can't be pinned on you, giving you total flexibility in the shadows instead of being tied down by public promises. Then you've got what's called the Muscat Protocol. This is basically the economic engine that makes the gray zone run. It describes a process where a country's most valuable stuff, we're talking oil, natural gas, you name it, is just taken off the books. It's made invisible to public markets, and then it's secretly traded away, not for money, but for political survival.
And the key to making that happen is something called resource neutralization. This is the actual act of making a country's wealth literally disappear from the systems we use to track it, like the global price of oil. I mean, if 1 billion barrels of oil suddenly become untraceable, you can't put a price on them, and you can't regulate who's buying them. What you've just done is create a gigantic shadow economy that operates totally outside the known financial world.
Now, this isn't just some abstract theory. According to Sultan's analysis, this shadow world has a real physical geography. There is literally a map to this place, a place he calls the Forgotten Place.
The doctrine points to two specific spots on the map that create this forgotten place. Up north, you have the Jaspandar-Abbas axis. Down south, you have the Bab el-Mandeb triangle. According to this theory, these 2 points create what's called a sovereign black hole. It's basically an invisible corridor where these neutralized assets are pulled out and sold off, often hidden by things like electronic warfare that makes them just vanish from any tracking system. So, where does all this invisible money go? Well, the doctrine points to elite, private hubs, like the Le Bourget airport just outside Paris. These are the kinds of places where the final deals are cut and all that liquidated national wealth gets quietly funneled back into the legitimate financial system, completely clean and totally disconnected from where it came from.
Okay, so let's pull it all back to March 16th, 2026. Because on that single day, we have these two totally conflicting realities being described. Let's just put them right next to each other and see how different they are.
On one side, you have the public language everyone knows, de-escalation, allies, stabilizing markets, international law. And on the other side, you have the language of the gray zone, non-attributable maneuvers, secret partners, and a system that's literally designed to make those public markets obsolete. You're looking at two completely different worldviews operating at the same time that are just fundamentally at odds with each other.
And that really leaves us with one giant question. If the world of public diplomacy is just one layer of reality, and underneath it there's this darker, more cynical geopolitical code pulling the strings, how can any of us really know what's going on? In a world full of gray zones, how do we ever know what's real?